Game of Thrones prequel series House of the Dragon is coming in 2022. It's based on George R. R. Martin's book Fire and Blood Volume 1, and on Martin's yet unfinished Fire and Blood Volume 2 book. Fire and Blood covers the tales from the legendary Aegon the Conqueror, all the way up to the Civil War, the Dance of the Dragons, that nearly tore their dynasty apart, while Fire and Blood Volume 2 will continue from where Part 1 ended, and will cover Blackfire rebellions and go all the way to the Mad King and Robert's Rebellion that ended Targaryen dynasty. House of the Dragon is based on the Targaryen history, and therefore it's not surprising that this show will feature many Targaryen dragons, and the most powerful of them all, Balerion the Black Dread. Balerion, called the Black Dread, was a dragon of House Targaryen. He was ridden by King Aegon I Targaryen during his conquest, alongside his sister Queen Visenia's Vhagar, and his sister Queen Rhaenys' Myrxis. Other known riders of Balerion were King Maegor I Targaryen, Princess Aeria Targaryen, and King Viserys I Targaryen. Balerion died of old age in 94 AC, during the reign of King Jaehaerys I Targaryen, being around 200 years old. Balerion's scales and wings were black. His fire was black, sometimes with swirls of red. When he was in the fullness of his power, his flames could melt steel and stone, and fuse sand into glass. Balerion was named after the ancient god of the Valyrian freehold. He was born in Valyria, and was one of the 5 dragons Aener Targaryen brought with him when he fled to Dragonstone to survive the doom of Valyria. After the other 4 of Aener's dragons died, Balerion became the last creature to have seen the Valyrian freehold in its prime. Balerion was the largest of all Targaryen dragons since Aegon's conquest. His wingspan was so large that his shadow could engulf entire towns when he passed overhead. His teeth were as long as swords, and his jaws were large enough to swallow an aurochs whole, or even one of the hairy mammoths that are said to roam the cold wastes beyond the port of Ibn. By 93 AC, Balerion had finally stopped growing. He had grown sluggish and heavy and was difficult to rouse. When Prince Viserys Targaryen claimed the dragon that year, the dragon struggled to take to the air. But back to prime Balerion. Balerion was claimed by Lord Aegon Targaryen, sometime before he married his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys. Aegon became involved in the wars in the disputed lands when Pentos and Tyrosh approached him, inviting him to join a grand alliance against Volantis, and he chose to heed their call. Mounting Balerion, he flew east to meet the Prince of Pentos and the Magisters of the Free City, then flew to Lys in time to set ablaze a Volantene fleet trying to take the city. Afterwards, Aegon turned his attention to conquering the 7 kingdoms, during which he flew on Balerion. Aegon then began planning the invasion of Westeros, long before launching the attack, spending time incognito on Balerion in air, scouting Westeros, visiting Westeros' cities and castles, and gaining intelligence on the different houses, their lords and their vassals. Aegon, his 2 sister wives, and their 3 dragons led a scant few thousand troops in invading the entire continent of Westeros. Aegon descended on Lords Mutton and Darklyn, killing both of them during Aegon's first test. Next, Aegon took Balerion to Harrenhal, where King Harrenhal took refuge in his formidable fortress. When Hor had not yielded by sunset, he took Balerion high up and descended inside the castle walls, and put the castle to flame. Balerion's dragonfire burned so hot that the towers of Harrenhal went up like candles, melting and twisting into the shapes they retain to this day. King Harren and his sons all perished, ending the line of House Hor. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Aegon was able to secure victory after victory using Balerion. Aegon next rode Balerion in the Field of Fire beside his sisters on Vhagar and Myrxis. Vhagar was a she-dragon of House Targaryen, and like Balerion, she was also named for one of the gods of Old Valyria. Vhagar was large enough that one could ride a horse down her gullet, but not as large as Balerion, nor as strong. It's also said that Vhagar's breath was so hot that it could melt a knight's armor and cook him inside, but not as hot as Balerion's, which could melt steel and stone. Myrxis, like Vhagar, was also a she-dragon of House Targaryen, and like 2 of her siblings, she was also named for one of the gods of Old Valyria. Myrxis was larger than Vhagar, but smaller than Balerion. Myrxis could swallow horses whole. Between the 3 dragons, 4,000 men were burned to death, including King Mern the 9th Gardener, resulting in Targaryen victory. Aegon's army was defeated, But the Targaryen dragons Balerion, Myrxis, and Vhagar allowed Aegon to achieve a great victory at the Field of Fire, which resulted in the death of Mern the Ninth Gardener, and the surrender of Lorien the First Lannister. When Aegon learned that King Torrhen Stark had crossed the neck and was leading army into the Riverlands, he raced ahead of his army on Balerion to meet the threat. When the Targaryen host was encamped at one side of the Trident, and the northern host on the other side, Torrhen's brother Brandon Snow offered to assassinate the sleeping dragons. Recalling the destruction the three dragons had caused on Field of Fire, Torrhen instead submitted to Aegon. According to a song, at the end of the war Balerion helped to forge the Iron Throne by melting the swords of Aegon's fallen enemies. Aegon treated the defeated lords with respect, and allowed each region to retain its own laws and customs. Aegon often traveled with Balerion throughout the realm, with maesters who educated him on each region's local customs and history. Aegon later flew Balerion into battle during the First Dornish War, where he suffered the greatest loss when his sister Queen Rhaenys Targaryen and her dragon Myrxis fell from the sky, after a shot from a scorpion took the dragon in the eye. The war took a different turn after this. Aegon's fury and grief at the loss of his wife was such that he headed for Dorne himself. Accompanied by Visenya, the last two Targaryens rained fire upon the desert strongholds to break the Dornish. The next 2 years were known as the Dragon's Wrath, a period when every Dornish castle felt the fury of the Dragon Riders. The only castle spared was Sunspear, the seat of House Martell, in hopes that the Dornish would turn against their liege lords. The strategy failed, and Dorne remained unconquered. After Aegon's death, Balerion was claimed by his son Prince Maegor, who had long coveted his father's mount, and had not claimed another dragon, because he considered all others unworthy. After Jonas, Arryn imprisoned his brother Lord Ronald, and declared himself independent of the Iron Throne. Maegor rode the Black Dread to the Vale and put down his rebellion. When Maegor was exiled to Pentos, as a punishment for his polygamous marriage, he took Balerion with him. After his brother King Aenys I died, Maegor flew back to Westeros on Balerion to claim the Iron Throne. In his reign as a king, Maegor used Balerion in the burning of the Sept of Remembrance, and in many other battles against the Faith Militant. In the battle beneath the God's Eye, Maegor used Balerion to kill his nephew Prince Aegon and his dragon Quicksilver. After Maegor's death, Balerion returned to Dragonstone, where he made his lair. Balerion was claimed as a mount by Princess Aeria Targaryen in late 54 AC. They disappeared and went missing for more than a year. King Jaehaerys I Targaryen sent expeditions to try and locate Balerion and the young princess, and the Master of Coin Rhaego of Draz offered a reward for any information on their new whereabouts, but none came forward that were credible. Balerion was the largest living dragon in the world, but there were no sightings of the dragon anywhere. Septon Barth believed that the lack of sightings suggested that Balerion was no longer in Westeros. Balerion returned to King's Landing in 56 AC, descending into the courtyard of the Red Keep with Aeria barely clinging to him. The princess was severely ill and died soon after. Barth's accounts describe wounds and half-healed scars on Balerion. The dragon bore a huge jagged rent down his left side, almost 9 feet long, and fresh blood still dripped from the wound, hot and smoking. Barth speculated that when Aeria claimed Balerion, she was unable to bend the dragon to her will, and instead the dragon had taken her to the place he had been born, Valyria. What could cause such wounds to mighty Balerion remains unknown. Shortly thereafter, Balerion became the first dragon to be housed in the Dragon Pit, where he was guarded by the Dragon Keepers. Balerion remained at the Dragon Pit. When Princess Alyssa Targaryen came to the Dragon Pit to claim a dragon of her own in 75 AC, the Dragon Keepers persuaded her not to try and claim Balerion, insisting that the dragon had become old and slow, suggesting that she would much more prefer a faster dragon. The last rider of Balerion was Prince Viserys Targaryen, who entered the Dragon Pit to claim the dragon in 93 AC. Balerion was hard to rouse, and struggled when Viserys urged him into the sky. They flew around King's Landing 3 times, although Viserys later confided to his father that he had originally intended to fly Balerion to Dragonstone. However, fearing that the dragon lacked the strength to do so, Viserys had opted otherwise. Balerion died in 94 AC, less than a year after Viserys claimed him as his mount. along with 18 other Targaryen dragon skulls. Balerion's skull hung on the wall in the Red Keep's throne room. After Robert's rebellion, King Robert I Baratheon had the skulls removed from the throne room and stored them in a dark cellar. That's the story of the mightiest Targaryen dragon. He's seen it all and been through it all, from the Valyrian freehold in its prime, to conquering the Seven Kingdoms and living to see generations of Targaryens rule in Westeros. Balerion was the largest dragon ever seen in Westeros. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.